Rise up, A-Town. It's the Falcons Squad. Sponsored by Game Time. Everything Atlanta Falcons every week. Breaking down all the big hits and game-changing plays from the ATL. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. Straight from the ATL, the Falcons Squad Show starts now.
Welcome to the Falcons Squad Show, your home for the best Atlanta Falcons football talk. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me, our Locked On Falcons host, Aaron Freeman, Locked On analyst, Jarvis Davis, and 11 Live anchor, Maria Martin. The Squad Show is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. MPX mixing it up, necessary or no? We'll talk about it. Speaking of mixing it up, more players in the mix in the secondary. We'll download on that. And boomer bust, yeah or nay? We'll discuss that too, but first let's talk about another showdown in the preseason. Jarvis, we're approaching the second game of the preseason for the Atlanta Falcons. So is there a player or group who needs to have a good showing against the Tennessee Titans Friday?
The first group that comes to mind for me has to be the second offensive line, right? Because they're going to get most of the snaps, for this particular game. And then, I know we're going to talk about a little bit later, Kirk Cousins may or may not play. We don't know, probably so. But I think that the identity of this team, we talk about identity. We've been having those conversations a lot seemingly lately with all the fights and all that stuff. But I think the identity of this team in Zac Robinson's second year, their success is almost solely dependent on how well they run the football. And I think that even though that's not the first string offensive line, I feel like some of that has to rub off on this backup offensive line, and they have to get some type of run game going if they're going to play Kirk, because Kirk can't just sit back there and just toss the ball all around and potentially risk him being injured. So I think that they have to establish themselves, get some guys, get up on some guys, get in front of some guys, and get your hands on them, move them off the ball a couple of yards, and let those backup running backs, let those guys go to work and move and get those chains moving, because this is very important for this team to be able to establish themselves as a run first team, but they're gonna slang that bad boy when they get the opportunity.
Yeah, and for you, Maria, looking at this game coming up, I think Jarvis makes a great point, because when we talked earlier in the week about concerns for this team as far as position groups, everyone agreed that second string O-line was of concern. So for you, who are you looking for as we approach the second game of the preseason, whether it's player or a group who needs to show up tomorrow night?
Yeah, I mean, the second offensive line, I think, is a really good point, because these guys are getting very valuable reps in the preseason. And, God forbid one of your starters on the offensive line go down. We've talked about this. That's going to be pretty concerning, because there's not one position on the offensive line where I think the reserve could be serviceable at this point. They got a lot of growth to do. And the only way that you do that is you get in-game reps. And so putting them in during the preseason will be valuable, very, very valuable. Another guy, specifically one player that I really would love to see have kind of a showing out, if you will, against the Titans would be Billy Bowman Jr. We talk about pressure on this rookie class. There is an increasingly large amount of pressure on Billy Bowman specifically, because they really are banking on this player to contribute in a couple of different ways. He's actively fighting for a starting role at nickel, and then you're going to mix him in at special teams almost for certain. This is a guy who is a certified tackler. He can actually tackle. This was a big issue for the secondary, specifically for the Falcons last year. And so for me, Billy Bowman, to kind of edge himself out and be more in the forefront of that conversation at nickel, he's got to have a really good game on Friday.
Yeah, and for you, Free, when you look at game 2 of this preseason, kind of who are you looking for that you feel like they need to show up, whether that's a bump from what you saw last week, or whether that is, hey, you didn't see anything last week and you need to see something tomorrow night?
Well, I think Jarvis and Maria both nailed the two spots, the second string offensive line and Billy Bowman. Billy Bowman to me is more of a want than a need, but I'm going to side with Jarvis on this. I need that second string offensive line to play better. Like, you have a competition potentially for a third running back on this roster, and you could not evaluate any of these running backs last week on their running ability, because there were literally no holes for those guys to run through. So you need to see that second string offensive line at least do something to create some holes, just so you can be like, okay, well, now, Elijah Dotson or, Carlos Washington or Nathan Carter or Jayshawn Corbin or one of these guys is emerging now as an option for you at that running back position behind Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier, because we actually can now look at you run through a gap and whatnot. And you talk about the potential for injuries there. Like, I was breaking this down last week on the podcast where, the odds are, based off of the Falcons' history, is like you're going to have your backup offensive lineman potentially start 5 or 6 games on average per season when you look at sort of how often injuries occur on that front with that 5-man unit. And so, as Maria said, right now, you don't really have anybody on that backup offensive line. Now, Storm Norton's out of the lineup. He's the most proven option. He's probably the one guy that you trust the most in that group. But you would like to have at least one guy on the interior that you can sit there and say, okay, well, if he's forced to play for Chris Lindstrom or Ryan Nuzul, we'll be okay at that spot. So I think the offensive line definitely needs to play much better against the Titans on Friday night.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that if we had to put it in rank order, it might be, as far as priority, the O-line and then the O-line and then the second string O-line. I think that's where we're going to go with that. But when you think about Kirk Cousins playing, that also makes that so critical, so important for that O-line to really show up and show out tomorrow night. So there are more things to think about than just Kirk Cousins having a solid game, showing that he's the healthiest, most potent QB2 in the league for the Falcons to put on the field if Michael Penix Jr. goes down. Really, you want him to stay healthy because some QB is going to go down training camp, preseason, first couple of weeks of the season. So is it worth it putting Kirk Cousins into the game for him to, quote unquote, get those game speed reps, get with that second unit? Or do you think this is really just too risky for him to play against the Titans, given the fact that you want a healthy Kirk to be able to keep on the trading block?
I have my doubts, right? Because like for the things that we all just laid out as far as that backup offensive line, but the more I think about it, I think Kirk will figure out a way to be able to get rid of the football. Obviously, knowing the offense like he knows it, the success he had before he ended up getting hurt, and that was the reason why he played badly. I think that if you're going to do it, I think you're going to have a game plan that kind of suits him. Turn around, hand the ball off, hopefully get some yardage, and then maybe third and medium. He can drop back there and throw the ball and get some completions and get a couple first downs and get out of there. But, if you're asking for a definitive answer, I definitely don't have that. Because of the thing that you just laid out, right? Matthew Stafford's back hurt really badly. How long he gonna be out? The Falcons no less need, Terry no less need. Ra used to be over there in that building as well. Like, hey, big head, how long he gonna be out? Gonna give us a little 4th round pick, man. Let's call it a day. You know what I'm saying? And kind of move on from that standpoint because Easton Stick is just amazing. They have the backup quarterback of the future. That's just. I mean,
File free. It's okay.
The Falcon prophet himself has said it. So he has spoken.
You're pushing the Aaron Freeman agenda.
Because Kirk is expendable at this point. You know what I'm saying? Like, we've seen what we need to see from Easton Stick. So, that's where we are right now. You know what I mean? Like, I wish I could do my Aaron Freeman imitation because, he was in whisper mode, when a certain person was on his show. Like, the whole tone and tenor just changed of Locked On Falcons. I'm talking about positivity was just bleeding over the airwaves. Y'all miss it out of life. You don't, listen to Locked On Falcons. So, just know that when Maria is on Aaron's show,
it's positive
positivity, and he gonna have his bedroom voice on. You know what I'm saying? I'm just saying those two things are going to be true. But yes, T, I know I'm going on the tangent, but follow
And
me.
slightly down the rabbit hole and off the tracks, but go ahead.
I'm going to land the plane. I promise you.
Please and
Here we
thank
go.
you.
Please.
Here we go. So yeah, if you're asking me definitively, should Kirk play? I don't know. But if I can see a scenario where he can be safe, because that's what I'm worried about. I'm concerned about his injury issue stuff behind this kind of shaky, semi-shaky backup offensive line. But I think overall, if they do decide to put him in there, I believe he'll be okay.
I think it's fine if Kirk plays. I really do. And I'm not expecting him to play an entire half like Easton Stick did. I think that would not be the plan. And I do think that the Falcons, if they do decide, which from what I understand will kind of be a joint effort, they're going to ask Kirk as well, is this something that you're up for? Do you want to do this? It's not just, hey, Kirk, get out there. Rob made that very clear on what day of the week is this? On Wednesday, that it was going to be a conversation with Kirk Cousins before they decide to trot him out there against the Titans. Again, I think it should just be a series or two, and if only he doesn't get hurt. So obviously we don't want that to happen.
Right.
And Kirk, honestly, in my opinion, has had one of the best weeks we've seen from him in the offseason during training camp. And again, this is with second team offense, and he looked very, very good. And especially on Wednesday, he did. So for him to go out there and prove to the 31 other teams where someone is going to need a quarterback, Tenitra, to your point, at some point throughout the NFL season, go out there and prove, I'm ready. Whatever happened to me in the Saints game, whatever happened prior, whatever I was dealing with, all of that is gone. To me, with a veteran quarterback, you prove it in a series. You prove it in 2 series. I have enough tape to have enough confidence. And obviously it depends on a couple of different things within the game, but they should have enough confidence that he's good to go. So for me, no big deal. Put him out there for a series, maybe 2, like maybe if you want to get crazy, but a whole half of the game, I just think is completely out of the question, and it should be for someone like Kirk. And I know we're dying to see Easton Stick come out there and manage this offense. I think you're going to get plenty of that on Friday, as well as Emory Jones, but I think it actually would be smart to put Kirk out there for a series or 2.
Where I sort of land on it is you just got to weigh the risk reward, right? Like as Maria said, I think at most we would see Kirk for like 2 series. And the reward is that you can build a market for Kirk that doesn't really exist. I know Jarvis mentioned the Rams, but this is disrespect for Jimmy Garoppolo, who's been in that system, who's basically at this stage in his career, basically Kirk Cousins at this stage in his career. And so, if the Rams are without Matt Stafford, like they got Jimmy G for like 10 cents on the dollar compared to what they would have to pay to get Kirk Cousins off the Falcons' hands. That's the part of the conversation. So I think
all shade towards Jimmy G, by the way.
Also, who else did the Rams have at quarterback?
Clavius Bennett. Is that who you're referring to? Okay, yeah.
He's there. If anyone forgot, he's there. He's there.
2-time national champion, right? Not 4 times like Easton Stick, but 2 times. Yeah. Okay.
They got rid of Easton Stick though, so whatever. LA anyway. City of LA.
I got a quota. I got to hit every week on this show. So you're hoping, if you're the Falcons, Kirk goes out there for the up to 2 series that we're talking about, plays well, and all of a sudden that drums up maybe a little bit of a market that currently, as we sit here, like no one's banging down the Falcons' door for Kirk Cousins, and as T said, like maybe there's an injury or whatever. But at that point, but then you have the risk of like no one's banging down Kirk Cousins' door, and if he goes out there behind the second string offensive line with second string wide receivers and doesn't look good, then people are going to be like, oh, he's cooked, even though we all understand that the circumstances were not in Kirk's favor. So that's the conversation I think the Falcons have to have, is like, yes, we can maybe play Kirk on Friday, and this will help us, in a month or 2 or whatever, where someone trades for him. But at the same time, it also could kind of kill any chance of a team coming for Kirk if he doesn't go out there and play well for the up to 2 series that he plays with. So that is I think the trade-off. As Maria said, like ultimately if it's Kirk's decision, then, based off what we know about Kirk, he's going to want to play. but we'll just sort of have to see.
Speaking of coming for someone, MPX mixing it up. Necessary or no? We'll take that under further review. This episode of our Falcons Squad Show is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of the year. NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means fantasy football season is back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. This year, I think we'll get back at playing some Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. So one of your favorite features might just be the new Guillotine Leagues. They just dropped. Every week, the lowest scoring team is eliminated, and the last one standing wins. So to celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout August. To kick it off, they just dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues that we talked about, that killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. If you're more into the classics, you can still play in head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. So stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/lockedonnfl. So, Maria, there were several dust-ups on the second day of joint practices. Michael Penix Jr. was allegedly in the mix in one of them. Is there any positive you can glean from QB1 getting all involved all up and through joint practice scuffles?
Oh, Mike wasn't allegedly involved. He was very much in that scuffle. And it wasn't just Mike, okay? So there were so many fights happening on multiple different fields. And then you turn around and special teams is getting into it. And so I think everybody just ramped up the competition. And I don't even know. It wasn't about the temperature outside. There was just something going on at practice. And according to Mike's account of everything that happened, there were a lot of words exchanged throughout the practice leading up to that moment. And so you get pushed enough, no matter who you are, and there are some words that are exchanged, you're going to turn around and chirp back a little bit. And he claims that he blacked out and he doesn't remember it. I think he's probably got a little bit more of a recollection than we understand. But good on QB1 to kind of keep the status quo. Yeah. So he ends up at the bottom of the pile of this fight. And it was one of the craziest things I've ever seen. I told Aaron Freeman yesterday on Locked On Falcons, I don't think that we will ever see anything like that again. It is a once in a lifetime thing with a starting quarterback. This is so abnormal for the signal caller to get down and dirty with everybody else. Normally they back up and everybody fights for them. So I respect the hell out of Michael Penix Jr. for doing that. JJ McCarthy is another guy that comes to mind who's a scrappy quarterback, former hockey player. He was an enforcer. For those of you that don't know what that means, on hockey teams, you send out your enforcer to start fights. And JJ McCarthy literally did that. So he's a scrappy quarterback as well. Not saying he's going to go blow for blow with guys at practice, but I think it's a positive thing, Tenitra. I really do. I'm not encouraging quarterbacks to go out there and drop the gloves. But when you see somebody like Michael Penix Jr., now your whole team is talking about, oh, we got a dog at quarterback. That can change kind of the environment and the thought process around your starter.
Maybe JJ McCarthy's career can go into the NHL.
That'd be great, man. Yes. Although they all really think they have something very special in Minnesota, so we'll see.
Oh, yeah.
I know we too.
I know what.
He's from Pasco County, Florida. I'm going to repeat that. Dade City, Pasco County, Florida. Did anybody really ever think that Michael Penix Jr. wasn't going to at some point mix it up? I said Dade City, Pasco County, Florida. I covered him, and he went to Tampa Bay Tech. But I'm going to move right along.
Yeah, don't let me comment about parts of Florida. Don't let me get in on that.
Exactly. So I'm like, this doesn't surprise me. This just really seems like it's par for the course. But okay.
Yes. One thing that I've noticed when you have a young man say where he's from, that's all that needs to be said. He like, man, I'm from Dade City. I'm just like, no words need to be spoken after that. Like,
If he said,
Everyone is
hey,
supposed to
I'm from
understand.
Dade City, or I'm from Pasco County, or part of Pasco anyway, or I'm from Tampa Bay Tech, or I'm from, hey, look, no commentary. But
Yeah, what
anyway,
about
Bree,
yeah.
hey, and look, Maria, just this is sidebar, but yeah, we definitely know he was in the scuffle. It allegedly is just that street term for street cred. That's all, but we know he was in the scuffle. All right, Free. Now I'm gonna swing this over to you before we have a second segment that goes off the rails. But of course, Michael Penix Jr. allegedly involved in the dust up yesterday. But is there anything positive you can glean from it? I mean, what do you think about the fact that he was in the mix of a little altercation?
Well, I just want to know, can Michael Penix throw hands as well as he throws bombs? And it sounds like the answer is yes. So you love to see it from your quarterback. Yeah, as Maria said, like, this is not a common occurrence. Maybe we can get some type of scrap in that week 2 game between him and JJ McCarthy. Pregame,
awesome.
postgame, whatever, get some head to head. I heard Taylor Swift on talking about how she thought quarterbacks were going at it when she first started watching football. She didn't understand that it was, the offense versus the defense or whatever. So I say we bring Taylor Swift's vision into football and get JJ McCarthy versus Michael Penix to see what in that week 2 game. But certainly, yes, I think this can be a rallying cry for this football team. There's been a lot of talk about the fighting and who's picking fights and who's getting in scuffles all summer long, and so this to me is kind of the culmination of that, finding out that your quarterback is at the heart of it, and after all, he is from Tampa, which is no words need to be said after that, because everybody knows the toughest people on the planet come from Tampa.
Whatever, that is not true.
I said Dade City. There's a difference.
Miami-Dade and Dade City are
out.
very different things. Let me just clarify. Miami-Dade and Dade City are very different things. Anyway, yes. That's all I'll say. South Florida ranks supreme. Sorry, Mike. Continue.
No, I'm done. I just wanted to trigger you.
I was triggered.
Should accomplish. So it sounds like you guys all think that, hey, it's okay if QB1 got in the mix a little bit. Might seem a little petty to some, but it doesn't sound like it seems petty to the squad show.
No, not at all. I mean, yeah, I don't want my quarterback getting into fights because
not on a regular, right?
Not on a regular. You know what I'm saying? But I don't mind him standing up for himself. That man said, "I ain't finna let you disrespect me." Yeah, like now we're not talking about football. That's another indicator. There are indicators as to people who can fight. They have certain conversation. The language is a little different and it's very direct. My brother like that. He real quiet, don't mess with nobody. Michael, he has kind of the same demeanor as Michael Penix, like very calm, cool, collected. But oh my gosh, if you try him, ain't no telling what they're gonna do. You don't know. And that's the thing that you need to be concerned about when it comes to throwing hands. So, but now in all seriousness, though, I think I'm glad that he understands what it means for cats to do command respect. Like, I appreciate that. And I think that, his play is going to do a lot of that, as far as going into the regular season. And if he continues to play like we think he can, I think the consensus is on this show that, hey, man, he's going to have some success, barring injury. I feel like, that's going to gain all the respect he needs. And then, of course, if you got your teammates out here saying, oh, man, he ready to go. Like, so that gets you a little bit more amped up from just a culture standpoint, right? Just the environment. Like, everybody like, oh, man, I'm going to ride for my boy. That's what I'm going to do. Caden Ellis was smiling ear to ear and after practice. Like, you just see the jubilation in his face is just there. And for them to kind of build on that, like Aaron said, I feel like that's something that you can like build off of, going forward.
I think, Marie, there were positive returns from James Pierce Jr., another guy who does not mind tussling, but that's more of the conversation and the commentary around what we saw from him at practices in weeks past. But let's talk about game footage. Let's talk about seeing him on the football field and where the need is for more of James Pierce Jr., Jalen Walker on the field for game 2. Have you seen enough of either or both of them, or do you want to see more?
I want to see more. I want to see as much as I can from these rookies, to be totally honest. And I think it would do them a disservice to take them out. I think it's different when you're looking at Michael Penix Jr. last year because he was a rookie and, you play him minimally in the preseason. You've seen enough. That's fine. That is a quarterback. That is a completely different scenario. For James Pierce Jr. and Jalen Walker, these are two players specifically that are really raw to me. Do I think that they have starting capabilities? Sure, probably. But do I think that there's a lot that needs to be finessed before we even get into they're definitely starters on this defense? Yeah, I do. And the only way to really understand that is when you put them in a game time situation. You're already starting to see kind of the evolution of James Pierce Jr., which is funny because remember at the beginning of training camp, it was drop the gloves. He's the enforcer. He's the one going out there like being scrappy and doing this and doing that. Now something is turning with James. He's starting to understand that when he talks about the little things, I asked him, what does that mean? You keep talking about, I want to do the little things better. That can mean so many different things for so many different players. And for James specifically, it's technique. It's how he rushes. All of these things that his coaches are trying to clean up, he's starting to verbalize that. He's starting to understand, okay, I don't need to just drop the gloves at practice and be the guy that gets everything mixed up all the time. I need to take it there, but not all the way. So you're starting to see that. And why would you want to take it 2 steps back by not letting him play in a game? So I think continue on the trajectory of letting them play, letting them evolve, especially Jalen Walker, who missed time during training camp with that injury. You got to get him out there. These guys need as much as they can get on the field before we get to the regular season, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as Maria. Like getting these rookies more action is, to me, the best course for these guys. With the development, I know the Falcons are going to be intentional, as Raheem put it earlier this summer, about playing these guys during the regular season, something we didn't quite see from last year's rookie class. But I do feel like you do have veteran options at a lot of these positions that you can turn to, that if you're going to go with the rookies, you need to have them, for lack of a better term, earn it, and it's not because these guys aren't capable of doing it. Like, I think we all agree when we look at the 4 rookies on the defensive side of the ball, like all of these guys are very capable of going out there and being, week 1 starters. It's not quite the same with the D line with Walker and Pierce, just because you're going to have that deep rotation. We've heard multiple times from Nate Ollie and others that, it's basically 4 snaps in and then you're out. So technically you're not really a starter. You're just all part of the rotation. But I do feel like the more reps that these guys get now, the better and more quickly they're going to be able to get up to speed in September when the team is counting on those guys. So whether it's Walker, whether it's Pierce, whether it's Bowman, Xavier Watson, of course, the incomparable Jack Nelson, I think getting as many of these rookies opportunities at this point in the calendar year, there's only upside to that.
The reason why I feel like it's so dope that Raheem Morris decided to play these guys is because of what Maria just mentioned. James Pierce understands that there's more to it than just going out there and speed rushing, trying to run around folks. It's so much more to this game than that, right? Especially from a technique standpoint. Hey, make sure you have a plan on 3rd and long. Don't just go out there and just try to feel your way through it, because guess what? That ball is going to be gone. You need to know exactly what you're doing before that ball is snapped. So I think, and preseason is a great tool to work those cobwebs out, but work those things out. And then for Jalen Walker, give me more. I need to see more from him, because the more he's out there, the more he gets comfortable in his role. I think Jeff Olbrich said something that I thought was it was profound. When you actually think about it, he was like, Jalen is kind of like a jack of all trades, but like not really a master of one. Like in the NFL, you got to have that. So that's why they decided, hey, we're going to put you at this edge. You're going to become a master of this. And then once you start to get your footing in that area, in that position, in this league, on this level against NFL size tackles, then we'll start to add those other things that we know that you can do well. But the base and foundation of why we picked you in the top 10, hey, this is not, I'm sorry, not in the top 10. Well, my mind went somewhere else. But anyway, as long as you being in the top half of the first round, like we need to show why we drafted you there and for you to be productive in that role before we start to try to add on, throw some other stuff at you.
Yeah, and Maria, there has been a wondering of whether or not Braylon Trice is being made of milk box material because people want to see him, but they haven't. So do you think that we will see Braylon Trice?
I think we're going to see him. And the reason why I think we're going to see him is because we have throughout practice, I know that was funny, throughout practice this week at training camp, he's ramped up the reps. I know we didn't see him in that first preseason game against the Lions, but this is someone that I think I've mentioned this on the show before. You wonder, is it too late for Braylon? Like, is there too many other pieces in front of him? And the reason why you wonder that is because of what you just mentioned, Tenitra. He has not been anywhere to be found. And, that was out of his control last year, of course. And that was never the plan for Braylon, clearly, when they drafted him to be the specific edge type of guy that they wanted him to be. And now you've drafted for depth. You've added some pieces that really could potentially be in front of Braylon. And so you're wondering, even though Jeff Ulbricht's plan and Nate Ollie's plan is to rotate these guys as much as they can, they talk about give me your 4 best plays and then you're out of there. So they're talking about, I love all these hockey references today, a changing of the lines of sorts. This is kind of how they're going to approach this defense. But for Braylon, did you miss the boat? Like, did you not? And sometimes in football and sports in general, timing is a massive thing. You could argue that for your life as well. But sometimes the timing doesn't work out on the roster. And I worry about that with Braylon Trice. And so you're going to have to see him. And I think you will on Friday.
Yeah, we'll see him. We should. Hopefully. Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason not to play him. I mean, unless he's more hurt than what they led us on to be as far as his rehab. He had a mishap or something like that, and I don't think that's the case. So, yeah, I think we'll see Braylon Trice and see if number 48 can get after it.
Yes, more players in the mix in the secondary. We'll unpack that in next up. This episode of our Falcons Squad Show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Monarch Money makes it simple to review finances with your partner. You can set goals, set budgets, and even spending activity limits in one place. So don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNFL. So, Aaron, according to reports, free agent corner C.J. Henderson is planning to sign with the Falcons. Now, we know Clark Phillips is dealing with a rib injury, didn't participate in joint practices. So that signing, coupled with the fact that we're maybe a little bit concerned about where Clark Phillips was already in the depth chart and already in the mix in the secondary room, could this be any type of situation that indicates to us maybe Phillips is the odd man out?
I mean, it's definitely possible. When you look at both Clark Phillips and C.J. Henderson throughout their careers, obviously C.J. Henderson was a very highly drafted player. He was a top 10 pick in that 2020 draft alongside Jeff Okudah, former Falcon, drafted ahead of A.J. Terrell, current Falcon. And Henderson didn't have a great rookie year in Jacksonville, got traded to the Panthers the following year, spent 3 years there in Carolina, basically as their number 3 guy. And then last year, I believe, was on the Steelers practice squad. And so, what Henderson has been a competent number 3 corner throughout his NFL career. Clark Phillips, you could say, has been a competent number 3/4 corner throughout his career. And the thing that's notable about those two players is neither one of those guys are big contributors on special teams, right? And so therefore, when you play at that cornerback position, if you're not a starter, if you're not one of the top three guys, you need to contribute on special teams. And those are two guys that haven't really done that at a regular basis throughout their NFL careers. And so can the Falcons really afford to keep two of those guys on the roster at this point in time? And that's where I think you could look at CJ Henderson as potentially a shot across the bow for Clark Phillips. I think this has a lot to do with Clark Phillips' absence. This has a lot to do with Kobe Bryant, the undrafted phenom that was going to, revolutionize the Falcons secondary, at least based off of the hype coming out of the draft. And he's now week to week, and having a week to week injury at this stage in training camp is really going to hurt his chances of making the roster. So I think the Falcons correctly realize, okay, we need to get another experienced cornerback in this room, and hopefully that will bolster some of the depth that I know Maria Martin, among others, was very concerned with throughout training camp.
Yeah. And so, Maria, what are your thoughts then on the signing of CJ Henderson, what this means for the depth in that room overall, but also what this means specifically for Clark Phillips?
I think the signing makes a lot of sense for all the reasons that Aaron just mentioned, and for reasons that I talked about weeks ago, that the cornerback depth on this team, regardless of these injuries that have now popped up, even before that, it concerned me. So now that you have two guys that you're concerned about being week to week, it becomes a little bit more clear. You're going to have to add some bodies and some very serviceable ones. And I know CJ, Aaron laid out his career path so far very eloquently, but CJ has kind of big time underperformed for the expectations when he was a first round draft pick and making a practice squad last year. His last really productive year was in 2023. And this too, though, is a guy that Raheem Morris has always been very high on. He's always really liked CJ. And so maybe he has the specific vision for this player, and that's why he's walking into this building. And he, reportedly had a couple of different options and chose the Falcons over those. And I would really like to believe, and I'm sure we're going to hear from CJ, that it has to do with Raheem Morris's belief in him as a corner. For Clark Phillips specifically, it doesn't look good, because this is somebody who, you're kind of waiting to turn the corner, and no pun intended, you're really wanting him to kind of turn the page into the next step of his career. And when you're on a week-to-week injury and you have a guy who is dying to make a roster, who is dying to prove that he was a first-round draft pick for a reason, now on the same team as a guy who was in the same draft class as him and AJ Terrell, you really start to wonder what happens to Clark Phillips. And I hate that. And I also hate it for Kobe Bryant, because Raw made the point that he's really looked fantastic in training camp, and he is on such a great trajectory path that to put him on the week-to-week situation is really just detrimental to the player, and then obviously to the roster as well. So the signing makes sense to me. We'll see how CJ can work out here, and who knows what happens with Clark, but hopefully it's not the worst, because he's really, really put in a lot of work to try to make that spot his.
Yeah. Thoughts on the signing, Jarvis, and thoughts on what it means for Clark Phillips?
I think it makes a lot of sense. Like when you think about, who the Falcons have on their official, unofficial, official depth chart. You have Lamar, an undrafted free agent in 2020, Lamar Jackson, not that Lamar Jackson. And then you have Kobe Bryant right behind him, who's another undrafted guy from this year. So when you think about the depth on this team and in that cornerback room, it's just not necessarily there in this moment. So, and I think that, as far as how it applies to Clark Phillips, I think, understanding that you don't have the depth piece. And then for Clark Phillips, he has to understand that. And you can't make this club in a tub. Because guess who's having a really, really good camp? Natron Brooks. And guess what he does really, really well? Plays special teams. Special teams, awesome. He loves it. And if he can continue to be on the trajectory that he's on right now. Now, he's a little guy. Don't get me wrong. And, that's not what the Falcons typically want. They want the long guys, the AJ Terrells of the world, the Kobe Bryants of the world, 6 feet, 185. prototypical corners that they want on this team. Guys normally can play man coverage when they're built like that. Jimmy Lake. Why you want to play cover 3 all the doggone time?
Why
But,
is Jimmy Lake always catching a stray on this show?
Because it's
Man is
imperative
gone.
that he catches strays on this show, because we've been calling that crap out since he was doing it, and he's no longer
That's why
here.
he's gone, Jarvis.
I'm just saying. I'm just making a reference point,
Okay, go ahead.
You understood exactly what I was talking about when I made the reference. You know what I'm saying? Like, come on.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about coaching, baby. You put your players in position to be successful, and that's what he did not do last year. So they turn things around. Jeff Ulbrich wants a certain type of guy, and he knows what he's going to do with that certain type of guy. But back to my point, why is everybody on my neck today? What's going on?
Look, I told you we had a whole hour. I was just cooking,
Yeah, it's all good. It's all love, baby. Man, I love everybody on this show and people that are watching and listening right now to this feature. But no, see, God don't like ugly. That's why your light went out, Maria. But I think that if Clark Phillips, he needs to get healthy. Now, granted, like, he can't help that he got hurt, but if Natron Brooks continues to do what he's doing, they bringing in a veteran guy that we know he's healthy. He's coming off the street. He's ready to roll. He's trying to get a roster spot. Raheem Moore is already familiar with him. He was familiar with when he was coming out in the draft. Shoot. From what I heard, they had C.J. Henderson ranked higher than A.J. Terrell, in that particular draft. So when you have all of these different little factors going against you, bro, you better figure out a way to get back healthy.
Fair enough. That's fair enough. And I think that's a great call on your part, Jarvis, because really the way that room is kind of working, because it's plentiful, for lack of a better term, you will have to distinguish yourself as far as what Raheem Morris sees as your fit for the organization overall. And Natron Brooks, with the things that he's doing, he's kind of making that case for himself. Now, speaking of somebody making a case for themselves, D'Angelo Malone, that there's some pieces in that linebacker room. We kind of talked about that linebacker room as well, and kind of where we see pieces being interchangeable. I mean, Maria, when you look at what he's been able to do, can he be a depth piece for the Falcons at inside linebacker?
Okay, do you want me to be your friend, Jarvis, and continue on the Jimmy Lake catching a stray right here?
I mean, why not, baby? We embraced it. Embrace it. Okay.
Honestly, no, aside from the Jimmy Lake thing, like, all jokes aside, D'Angelo Malone is the perfect example of a player that coaches haven't really quite known what to do with D'Angelo to this point. And so not, directly giving Jimmy Lake some crap for that. But D'Angelo Malone, he's just one of those players that you haven't figured out. And so with a guy like Caden Ellis, who is interchangeable at a couple of different players, he's the unicorn in this linebacker group, in my opinion. Like, you can put him at a couple of different things. He does a couple of different things really well. He is the anomaly in that what you were talking about, Jeff Ulbrich discusses a jack of all trades, a master of none. Leave Caden out of that. Everybody else, I'm looking at you. You have to figure out one thing to master really well. And D'Angelo Malone was actually one of the first players that Jeff Ulbrich circled and said, we got to figure out something to do with you, and you've got to master something. And so for him, it was being a stacked linebacker. And that's kind of his vision for him first. And you see kind of what that looked like against Detroit. You didn't really get a lot of the second half, obviously, because of what had happened. But in the first half, he's an inside linebacker in that vision. I thought he played very, very well. D'Angelo Malone's carving himself out a place on this roster because of what we're talking about, because there is a plan for him for, I believe, the first time in his career in the NFL. So, thank goodness. Exactly. Thank goodness for Jeff Ulbrich kind of putting that on the table. And I hope that all of these things he's talking about really come to fruition, because for a player like D'Angelo Malone, I think that's going to pay dividends in a linebacker group that equally doesn't have a ton of depth when you look at it. It could, maybe they prove me wrong, but this is a squad that, remember last year, the inside linebacker group, we were like, they have the most depth of anybody on the field. And then look what happened to that group. So D'Angelo Malone, I think, has more of an emphasis on that group than people realize.
Yeah, and to be fair to Jimmy Lake, who
poor Jimmy. Sorry, Jimmy.
it's not just him that didn't know how to do with D'Angelo Malone, because Ryan Nielsen was like, who? I never heard of that dude. Because
that's why I said his whole career. It's not just Jimmy.
He played, I believe, 3 snaps, right?
Yeah.
One less snap than national championship that Easton Stick has won in his college career. But, I think with D'Angelo Malone, I think this is a good sign for him to get these reps at inside linebacker. And I think, Maria mentions Caden Ellis. Well, this is basically the career path that Caden Ellis went through in New Orleans. And now, the Falcons are hoping they can kind of get him, D'Angelo Malone, on an accelerated plan, because Caden Ellis got like 3 years of being a linebacker before he was kind of forced in the lineup due to injuries. And D'Angelo Malone's going to get 3 months of being an inside linebacker before the possibility, as Maria mentions, with some of the concerns about the depth with Troy Anderson being down, JD Bertrand being in and out of the lineup and whatnot. So they need, some that depth to be shored up. And so D'Angelo Malone's going to have to be a quick study. He's going to have to be on the Caden Ellis osmosis, fast track when it comes to learning that position. But, you see the value that he brings on special teams. He led the team in special teams tackles last year. That's something that we don't talk enough about with D'Angelo Malone and his contribution to this team. If he can add, we know obviously he's not the world's greatest pass rusher, or else he would have been used in that regard, because boy knows the Falcons could have used some pass rush help over the last 3 years. But he can bring something to that table as a pass rusher. And if the Falcons can get creative in the same ways that they got creative with using Caden Ellis in that role, you could see D'Angelo Malone being maybe a more impactful pass rusher, particularly as a stand-up linebacker, than he has been purely coming off the edge. And so if he can also do all of the other things that a stand-up linebacker can do, stop the run and coverage, that just adds more value to D'Angelo Malone, who for basically the last 3 years has been a forgotten player as this 3rd-round pick that the Falcons picked up, if I'm not mistaken, from the Matt Ryan trade, was the compensation.
Very important pick.
We didn't get anything out of this. And it's like, now we're finally, maybe we might get something out of this. And so I think this is a good move for D'Angelo Malone.
Yeah, and because to be honest with you, he was one of my guys where I was Jarvis scared. I was like, hey man, is this dude gonna make this doggone team?
Jarvis scared.
His saving grace was obviously, I keep going back to special teams, mid to late round guys. You better be able to do it. You want to stick around, and until you get into a system that is going to cater to your capabilities. Like, special teams got to be the way you get into the door, right? So, and he's been able to do that. I think Raheem Morris even referred to him as a beast. He's a bully, a barnyard bully, backyard bully, whatever, one of those doggone sayings. He's a backyard bully when it comes to that special team. So, yeah, we know that, hey, that's Marquise Williams is going to vouch for him when the cut downs come, right? Now, you're putting yourself in a situation where you playing stat linebacker, you changed your body. I almost didn't even recognize D'Angelo when I first saw him in the spring. I was like, oh, this dude slimmed up a lot, So when you look at it from that aspect of it, it's just like, okay, it's something about having a plan for a player. It just speaks to my soul. Like when coaches come in and they immediately say, yep, I need you to drop X, Y, and weight. Yep, I need you to pick up weight. Look at Kentavious Street. Some people thought he might have been an odd man out with all the young pups coming in, doorless and all that stuff. Guess who was the first sub once David Onyemata came out yesterday in the first day of joint practices? Number 93. So when you think about coaches having a plan for guys, how they can how you going to make this team, and when you have that plan, they go out there and execute it because they understand that you have their best interest at heart. I love what I'm seeing from D'Angelo, and to see that be put on display against the Lions, and still, get a little run in the second half at the edge spot. I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah. Speaking of, does Raheem Morris love what he sees from Young-hoe Koo? Is it enough? We'll explain next. Jarvis, Raheem Morris said Young-hoe Koo will handle the kicking duties tomorrow night. Is this the game that seals the deal for Koo as the starting kicker, or is there still a chance that he plays and possibly kicks his way out of the starting spot?
I don't see that happening because Koo looks healthy from what I've seen based off my eyeballs. Like if Koo is healthy, he gonna make his kicks. And I think that, this is one of those games where I do feel like you just want confirmation, in live action. Like he wants to. I feel like Rob wants to see it. He's seen it in practice. I'm sure he just said to himself, like, all right, this is a competition, but like I've seen what I need to see. And I think it's just a matter of him putting it on tape. And once he puts it on tape, I think, Koo will be totally fine. And I don't see this lingering or anything like that as long as he stays healthy. And I feel like Lenny Craig ultimately was brought in just in case Koo gets hurt. They have a plan. Look at there. They have a plan if Koo gets hurt. You have a plan for players when you're bringing a new system and all that stuff. You have a plan. You don't run cover 3, on 3rd and 7, and you have your corners lined up 9 yards off the ball and backpedaling as soon as the ball snaps. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, when you plan for stuff, good things happen.
That's still fired, but okay.
Remember the 6 Ps. Proper planning prevents piss poor performance.
Okay. Back to Young-hoe Koo. So I have said from the beginning, similar to these guys, Tenitra, that it is Young-hoe Koo's job to lose. Having insurance behind Koo clearly is a good thing because Young-hoe Koo's been hurt. This is not the first time. So this 6P, I don't know what it was even. It's very smart when it comes to Young-hoe Koo as a player.
It's a rap album reference. I'll let you know after the show.
Okay. I can't repeat it is what I mean. I'm going to let you handle that. But what I will say about Young-hoe Koo is that I still think it's his job to essentially kick away. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think similarly to what Ross said in the past, his wagon is hitched to Young-hoe Koo, and I don't think he's going to unhitch it unless the wheels are certainly falling off. And if he's healthy, which I'm going to back Jarvis up, I think Young-hoe Koo is completely healthy. And I think you're going to get kind of the solidified version of that in the Tennessee preseason game. Like, I'm healthy. I told you, I'm showing you, here it is. And then it's Young-hoe Koo's job. So, yeah, I mean, I don't really think this is dramatic or as dramatic as people may think it is because there is kind of, quote unquote, a kicking competition just because Lenny Craig is really good. But Young-hoe Koo, I think all of you with Koo jerseys, because there's a lot of you guys out there. I've never seen so many kicker jerseys in my life at a game. You guys may be safe this year.
Yeah. So Jarvis, I'm sorry. Go back to that 6 Ps. Who created that?
So that is a interlude, no, a prelude on Youngbloods '85 album. You remember the Youngbloods? Are you familiar with the Youngbloods? T.
Okay, free move on because I'm about to roast him. So dare he try to take my hip hop street credit.
Over it.
I'm over 2 today for T. I'm so over. I'm over. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Forgive me.
He did not try to question my hip hop credibility. What in the what are we doing? When I just dropped a jewel for Maria from the philosopher Biggie Smalls, and now in this segment we're questioning my hip hop cred. Oh, free. Oh, the slander.
So back to Young-hoe Koo.
I'm sorry.
Free, just take me back to Young-hoe Koo because it's too much. The pain that is resonating in my body right now is just too much. Continue, Free. Bring it back home to Koo.
I kind of want to get more of this, but okay, let's talk about it. I think
we've done our jobs already.
As Jarvis and Maria have said, it is Young-hoe Koo's job to lose. Is it possible that this becomes a bigger thing after Friday night because Koo goes out there and shanks a couple of field goals? Yeah, that's possible. It's possible. We've seen Young-hoe Koo miss some field goals in the preseason in previous summers, and then everybody's like, is something wrong with Young-hoe Koo? And then, with the exception of last year, usually we get to the regular season and it's fine, right?
Sure.
So that's a possibility. But as others have said, just assuming Young-hoe Koo is the normal Young-hoe Koo that, for the most part, last year being the exception, that we've seen over the last 5-6 years, yeah, this game should end any possibility of this being this quote unquote open competition at the kicking competition. And as others have said, myself as well on Locked on Falcons, that the plan was for Lenny Krieg to be their emergency option in the event of an injury in season, not necessarily coming in and taking Young-hoe Koo's job. But certainly if Koo goes out there and goes 1 for 3 on field goals in this game, then there's going to be some explaining to do, and we're going to have a lot more questions come Saturday than we have at this point on Thursday. But I think for the most part, it's safe to bet that it'll all work out the way that I think a lot of us think it will.
Yeah. So similarly, I think a lot of us are looking forward to the fact that we're probably not going to see Michael Penix Jr. during the preseason. It's going to work out. Everything's going to be fine come September 7th, right? But here was an interesting article that I saw, Jarvis, that I wanted to get you guys' reaction on real quick. I saw it on Bleacher Report. It talked about the 10 NFL teams with the biggest boom or bust potential in the league. And you sort of saw some teams that are in make or break mode, similar to Atlanta, right? So you see Minnesota with, hey, they're boom or bust because you parted ways with Sam Darnold, and you better hope JJ McCarthy lives up to the hype. The Cincinnati Bengals, is Joe Burrow going to be able to get it done with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, or are they going to see a downfall because of all the drama that led up to training camp on the defensive side of the ball and actually continues with the hold into Trey Hendrickson, and then it goes on about the Steelers, then the Jets, followed by the Texans, then you get into the top 5 boom or bust. Jaguars at 5, Cardinals at 4, Broncos at 3, Bears at 1. Guess who landed at 2? The Atlanta Falcons, because Bleacher feels like they, other than the Chicago Bears, are in a boom or bust situation. Here's the criterion, the biggest criterion, Michael Penix Jr. If he comes through in his first full season as QB1, all the talent around him lives up to where they are, Bleacher feels like this is a more than conquerable division. Bust side, Penix suffers from growing pains. The defense remains the liability, and then you get the 8th straight year in a row where this team poses a losing record. Now, their outcome is that they do think that while the jury's out on Penix, there's still enough evidence to support that it's going to be more of a boom season in favor of boom than bust. But what would you guys say, just based on the one person that they're putting everything on for boom or bust? Jarvis, start with you.
I don't necessarily think it's boom or bust, because what has this team have been falling? They've been mid. Like mid teams mean they're just right on the verge of just being good, but they're not awful. Like, so when I think bust, I think 3-14 or 5-12 or whatever, something like that. I don't think this is a boom or bust team. I feel like this is playoffs or around 500 type situation. If things don't go well, or if Michael Penix just isn't that guy, and I don't think that, of course there's levels to it, right? But I don't think that his or my evaluation of what I think he could be is that far off. Even if it's off, I don't feel like it's going to be. I think the floor is high, for him, right? I don't think he's going to be Desmond Ridder, he's not going to be Marcus Mariota, he's not going to be a flailing in my career coming to the end Matt Ryan, so for those reasons, I feel like this is one of those situations where guys don't really pay attention to everything that's going on with teams, and they kind of just go off of previous history, and like say, oh yeah, this can be a boom or bust because we didn't have Michael Penix ranked that high in that quarterback draft, so we're going to pick them as a bust. Nah, that's exactly what this was. But nah, I don't think this is a boom or bust team at all, to be honest with you.
It almost seems like, too, Maria, that they're predicating the boom or bust on Michael Penix Jr. saying, like, hey, if he doesn't perform at the highest of high levels, there's nothing else in the room in Flowery Branch. There's nobody else in the locker room. There's no other scenario where they're going to be great. Either it's going to be great with Michael Penix Jr. or it's going to be trash without him. But do you feel like it's that boom or bust for this team based off of just one person, albeit QB1?
Yeah, I mean, I understand the thought process on it because of the nature of the quarterback situation in Atlanta, and with them having a veteran quarterback and then blowing it up for Michael Penix essentially. And then behind Michael Penix, yes, Easton Stick is there, Aaron, but really like all of your eggs are in the basket of Michael Penix at this point for this franchise. So I understand the thought process with that, but I agree with Jarvis. What's the bust scenario for this team who hasn't made the playoffs since I've been here? And I've covered this team. This will be my 6th season. So there's no real bust scenario other than you have to argue that all around Michael Penix Jr., they've got it figured out on the offensive side of the ball. And then defense, you've really put actual time and energy and effort into that side of the ball this year. So in theory, this should be a better football team. One caveat to this is that I think the NFC South is going to be a little bit more of a tougher out than people realize this year. Last year, we joked that, it was one of the weaker divisions and it was the Falcons to win, which clearly did not happen despite sweeping the Bucs, who eventually won the division once again. But there are teams that have drastically improved within the NFC South, and there is more pressure in that aspect. And there's an immense amount of pressure on Michael Penix Jr. to work out with this franchise. There is no secret about that. Although I just don't see a scenario where it completely deteriorates and it's not what we think it can become. Do I think they lift a Lombardi trophy at the end of the year next year? No, I don't. I think that's a ridiculous expectation for this team that's still growing, albeit they've made really valuable changes. And then at the same time, Jaden Daniels is an anomaly, okay? His first year was something we really haven't seen very much of. And so if you don't get that from Michael Penix Jr., he'll be fine. It's okay. And so I don't know. I understand somewhat of the thought process between the quarterbacks, but I don't really think, I agree with Jarvis, I don't think this is a boomer bust team.
Yeah. I'll say this. I think when we think bust and we think, oh, will the bottom fall out and this team will win 4 or 5 games? Yeah, I don't think that's the case with the Falcons. I think bust in this case is what happens if they have another 7 or 8 win season. And that feels like a bust just because that's been the story of this team for 7 years now. And if that lingers into 8, and, a lot of what the Falcons have done the last couple of years is like, hey, we got a new quarterback and that's going to solve the problems, because mostly every other position on offense is basically the same for the last couple of years. And they've basically, whether it was Kirk Cousins last year or now Michael Penix Jr. this year, is like the offense is good to go. We just need to get the right quarterback going. And that's where the boom comes from for Michael Penix and whatnot. But if that doesn't solve the problem and the Falcons are just, once again, a good but not great offense, and then the defense doesn't show the improvement in the growth that we all think it's capable of showing with the investments that they've made on that side of the ball, then I do feel like that is somewhat of a bust in the sense of all the bets that the Falcons are making busted out, right? They didn't go the way that they thought they were going to go. And then you have to, if you're Arthur Blank and you're the decider, the owner of the organization, you have to decide, like, the vision of Terry Fontenot over these 5 years hasn't really paid off really at all in that scenario where, again, the Falcons only win 7 or 8 games. And then you have to kind of wonder, like, is Raheem Morris the answer that I need at the position? Because he came in with the idea, like, we fired Arthur Smith because he didn't win games. And then if Raheem comes in and it just wins one more game, like, was that worth all the moves that the Falcons? So I feel like that's where the bust comes from, where it's not, hey, they're a bust where they go 500 or below 500 and they're terrible, but it's just like, if they just have another mediocre mid-season, what are we doing? Why are we going to continue to just keep running it back with the same people thinking it's going to suddenly change?
Nothing's more frustrating than being mid for a football team, because you're right there. You're not all the way at the bottom, which where you sit if you're there. and you're certainly not winning Super Bowls and not consistently doing that or even making deep runs in the playoffs. So when you're consistently a middle of the pack football team, there is nothing worse than that, because I'm a couple of moves, a couple of coaches, whatever, away from getting into this tier, which is where I want to go. But I've consistently been at this line. I think that's a really valuable point that probably we don't talk about enough.
Yeah. Oh, we do. We just call it the Pittsburgh Steelers. Thanks to our everydayers for making the Falcons Squad Show your first listen of the day. Be sure to stop by Locked On Falcons with your host, Aaron Freeman, as your second listen. Check out Maria Martin, host of Sports Extra on Sundays on 11 Alive. And you can catch Jarvis as a frequent contributor for Locked On Falcons and Sports Extra, and a good sport he was today. See you next time.